Thank you for joining us today for the Polsky Small Business Bootcamp and our session on cash management. This has been a phenomenal week for us here at the Polsky Center, the University of Chicago's Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center, serving students, staff, faculty, and business owners beyond, as we come together to serve the large number of small business owners that are undergoing a severe crisis in this COVID time. We've been very lucky to come together as a community and with a series of experts around different topics. Today's session with Kathleen Fitzgerald will focus in on cash management. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our partners at the university, the Chicago Booth School of Business, the Rostani Center for Social Sector Innovation, and the Office of Civic Engagement on behalf of a large set of experts and volunteers who've come together to make this week possible. From our staff, I would like to thank everyone at the Polsky Center who has stepped in to help to create this content and to help run these live streams, with particular thanks to my colleague Katie Spoden, who has been the main organizer of this week's events. We're extremely lucky today to have Kathleen Fitzgerald with us. Kathleen and I have worked together for a number of years supporting our executive MBA students and their entrepreneurial and business school journeys. Kathleen is an adjunct associate professor of strategic management at Chicago Booth School of Business. She brings a remarkable wide array of experience as an educator and a practitioner in the classroom. She has taught courses in accounting, investments, corporate finance, strategy, international finance, and financial management. So it's with that I'm extremely proud and pleased to present today's presenter, Kathleen Fitzgerald. Thank you.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for that. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Hello, Paris. So thanks for coming, and thanks to Polsky for organizing everything. I am going to get started. I hope that as you go along, if you have any questions, you will just let me know in the chat. If I can't get to them right away, I'll definitely get to them before we finish. Sound good? Where are most of you sitting? Can you let me know, just write in the chat, kind of like if you can write in the chat, what type of company that you have or wish you had or will have. I just want to see if you can work that chat. I know Lauren can. Are we good? That way I know I'm not talking to myself. Although I don't think I am. There we go.
Hey, Kathleen, hold on. I think we might have lost your sound.
Do you still have my sound?
There you go. That's good.
Oh, sorry. I must have hit something. Where'd you lose me?
About a minute ago.
Okay, so my bad. I must have hit the microphone. So what I was saying is, at Booth, we teach future MBAs to run businesses, which is what most of you are doing already, right? So I kind of want to think about the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, right? So most of you have, you have got your past tools. You've got some understanding of accounting and economics, statistics, even if you don't know, mathematics, you've got software, and you've got lots of experience in your business. You want this slide, Andrew? Yeah, these are just the goals. Oh, okay. So right after I talked about your companies, then what I was saying is, what are the things that you do in your companies, right? In a big general perspective. And so I was thinking about the tools that you would have had, to successfully run the businesses and get them to where you have them today, right? And then within anyone's business, we always think of like 4 main components. So we've got our strategy, we've got our investing, your financing, and your operating activities. So strategy is where you came up with your business and you thought, what problem am I solving? How's this problem being solved now? Why is it better that I'm solving this problem? Why is my method better, right? So you were thinking about strategy when you started your business. And then once you had your strategy, you had to think about, okay, well, what investments do I need to make to put this strategy into place, right? Financing is more about, how do I pay for those investments that I need to make to put my strategy into place? And then the operations is the running of the business. So for me, when we think about cash management, or where does cash come from and where does cash go, it really does depend on all of these things, right? Because in your strategy, you might have a business model where you get paid in advance, or you're providing the good or service, or maybe you get paid 60 days later, or maybe you have government clients and they pay you 6 months later, right? So you want to think about, how does your strategy define what's going to happen with your investing, financing, and operating activities? So kind of keep in mind the main functions of the business. And then of course, for you to even make those things happen, you need skills in leadership, management, decision-making, and negotiations. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today are really going to put these things to the test, right? Like, you need to go back to your landlord and negotiate, right? I got to decide, am I going to shut down for a month and just pick everything up later? How am I going to make these decisions, right? And so you had a lot of talks this week on different aspects of this. And today we're going to focus on the cash part. But one other thing that's super important is down the bottom when we talk about the business environment. So you guys are used to running these businesses, you have some ups and you have some downs. What's happening now is probably a really low probability event that's put us in a business environment that is making things extremely challenging, right? But don't forget that you've been through challenges before. And so it's just a matter of kind of pivoting and making these things happen. So let's talk about maybe some of these things. So on the strategy side, the main activities that we were talking about was, what is my business, right? So you want to really, one of my friends, he said, we're in a crisis, but it was also an opportunity for us to think about, what business are we in, right? And maybe, do we need to pivot a little bit? Maybe do we need to think about our business model and how we might want to change that, right? What are our competitive advantages? So what makes us better than, say, our competitors? And what is that for the short run, or is it for the long run, right? So take this time to think about what your strategy is. It can be a marketing strategy. It can be a pricing strategy, any type of strategy. On the investing side, things that you invest in, you might invest in property, right? You might invest in computers, right? Making a decision for training or development, right? A lot of these things are an inventory system. There's lots of different types of investments that you make on the day-to-day running of your business. And like I said, financing is how you pay for those things. So basically, you can pay for things with what we would call retained earnings. So, sorry, I'm looking at my screen. I'm doing this on my iPad. Retained earnings. So you could finance your company's investing and operating activities by money that you've earned. That's kind of hard at the beginning, right? You could borrow money, right? Go to the bank, go to SBA, find a different way to finance these investments. Your debt could be long-term. It could be short-term. You could put capital into the company, which is called equity, right? You could get other people to invest in your company. So we finance through retained earnings, we finance through debt, we finance through equity. You could also make use of what I'm going to call and talk about a lot today, working capital. So when I think of working capital, I think of things like accounts receivable, inventory, and accounts payable, say to our suppliers. So not really going to the bank and getting a loan, but working with your suppliers to allow you to pay in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, something like that. And then our operating activities, right? This is basically providing the good or the service. This is the running of the business, day-to-day operations. Your marketing, your advertising, you're paying your bills, you're paying your employees, finding new markets for your goods. So just kind of think about, this is what you're already doing, and maybe we compartmentalize things just a little bit so that we can think about what are the different things that fall into each bucket. And that's important because one of the things that you should really be getting a hold of right now is where you are, right? And so I'm assuming that most of you have a set of financial statements. Some people might only have, an income statement or P&L or something like that, but it would be nice at this point in time to have a full set of financial statements. So a balance sheet. So a balance sheet is very simple in theory, right? All it says is, this is what we've invested in, and this is how we've paid for it. So I have all of these assets, which is just an accounting term for investments. And then I either paid for it with liabilities, that's debt, right? So that's what we owe our creditors. And the shareholders' equity, that's you or any other owners that you have. And you either finance through the earnings that you keep in the firm, that's retained earnings, and don't pay out to yourself or anyone else as a dividend, or through like what I said before, which is that contributed capital. So that's the balance sheet. The balance sheet says of those four main activities, strategy, investing, financing, and operating, the balance sheet says this is what we invested in and this is how we paid for it. The income statement, okay, tells us about the running of the business. So this is where we're thinking about things like profit margins, right? We are looking at our revenues. I call them revenues because I'm an accountant, but you might call them sales or sales revenue, anything like that. And then we have our expenses, which is the actual running of the business. So the income statement is like for a period of time. So it might say during 2021, but the balance sheet would say as of, December 31st, 2021. Look at, I just totally got rid of 2020. It's like it didn't exist. We're moving into 2021. So the income statement is telling me how I'm doing for a period. The statement of cash flows tells us where does the cash come from and where is the cash going. And it breaks it down into the three main activities of operations, investing, and financing. Is that clear? Does that make sense to you? You can write yes if you want. If anyone writes yes, then I just move on. Let's see. I don't know if they can see my, do I have to wait for you to ask for a question, EJ? Who knows?
Just a little bit of a delay to the
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Okay. So I'm gonna move on to what type of accounts we have. So, yes, that's all I needed. Okay. So if you were to think about these types of accounts, so an asset, remember, is an investment, right? And when we think about our investments, we really break them down into current and non-current. And so assets, if you think of them as what I'm going to say are future benefits, we want to know what benefits are coming this year and what benefits might we use to create benefits in future years? So when we think about current assets, we usually think about cash, inventory, accounts receivable, things that we expect to be able to either already be in cash or turn into cash sometime in the next year. Whereas our non-current assets would be like property, plant, and equipment that we talked about earlier. So if we were to think about most of what you would have on your balance sheet, I would imagine unless you're a service business, most of you would at least have cash, inventory, and accounts receivable, right? On the liability side, for current liabilities are the ones you need to pay within the year. And when you're concerned with liquidity, like I imagine a lot of you are right now, current liabilities are where the action is, right? So this would be like any accounts payable that you have. Anything that was due to a supplier, or a supplier of rent, a supplier of goods, a supplier of services, anything like that. Those are what we call current liabilities. And then our non-current liabilities, they're mostly things like long-term debt. And you may have down here like a notes payable, something that was, due within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Could be your line of credit that has a certain payoff. And then, of course, on the shareholders' equity, it's the same thing as before: retained earnings and contributed capital. You may call them different things, but this is the amount of cash that you put into the business from the beginning, probably to buy, some property, software, train employees, get into a lease, do anything that you would have needed to do. On the revenue side, what we want to think about on the revenue side is that's our sales, right? And so our sales is just the quantity that we sold times the price that we sold them for. And you may be selling goods, right? You may be selling services. So if I look up here into my little chat, so we've got financial services, wholesale, corporate services, biotech, nonprofits, a coffee house, right? Consulting companies that you would have to consult with people on this, musical instruments. So a lot of you are providing goods and services, some just goods and some services. So what we're going to talk about later when we think about strategy is, maybe can we expand that a little bit, or just change the way that we do these things, right? On the expenses side, this is the cost to run the business. So this is your employee salaries, right? These are your taxes. This is any interest expense or mortgage that you might have on your business. This could be your utilities. For some of you, might be doing research and development. You definitely have, I would imagine, you had some talks on marketing this week, right? Or within marketing, maybe you have advertising. So what you want to be able to do is think about, let's think about all the accounts in my business, and let's look at them one by one and see if I can make any type of changes that is going to help release me from this cash kind of freeze, which I'm at right now. And it's not just you. Now, I put this up here not so that we could read a balance sheet, but to show you that Amazon, a company we're probably getting a lot more used to these days, right? Even more than ever. Their balance sheet looks just like yours. I mean, they've got a few more zeros. These are actually, I think, in millions. So they probably don't have as much of a cash issue as the rest of us, but they still have cash. Marketable securities, that's just a short-term use of excess cash. So if you bought securities in another company, or put money in a CD, this is probably where, for you guys, you might have, if you have one, where you might have your cash reserve, right? Because you don't want your cash reserve sitting under the mattress. It's probably better to at least put it in some type of government bond or something that earns at least enough to offset inflation. This is their inventories and their accounts receivable. So even a multi-billion-dollar company like Amazon, they look like you, right? It's just that they have a few more zeros, which I did not show. What do they have for their non-current assets? Like you, property, plant, and equipment. Like you, leases. You might not have goodwill. This comes from buying other companies, but you might if you've purchased another company in the past. So we can see all of their assets from year to year. How did they pay for them, right? They pay for them like you do. Accounts payable, that's to their suppliers. Accrued expenses. They use the term accrued expenses. That's like what you owe your employees. Salaries expense, utilities expense, things that you have incurred but not yet paid. And so, our idea here is going to be, let's stretch these out if we can and take our accounts receivable, and we're going to think about, can we accelerate those, right? So get the cash in and push the payments out. That's kind of like the name of the game. Just like taxes, right? Tax avoidance, not tax evasion. That's what I learned in my tax class. Unearned revenue. Unearned revenue, this is cash received in advance. And so what happens is you receive that cash in advance, and it's on a liability on your books because you haven't provided the good or the service. So what's interesting, we all know Starbucks. Starbucks has about $1.4 billion in inventory on their books, right? But they also have about $1.4 billion of advances from customers, which is you and me, right? That is us buying those gift cards, right? That's the gift cards. And so we basically are financing the inventory at Starbucks. And so for you, if you can get people to prepay you, then that's great because you have the cash. You buy the inventory, but don't pay in cash. Pay your suppliers 60 days down the road if you can. And so you get to make use of that cash. So I would say marketing is different from, I'm answering a question in the chat. I would say advertising is an aspect of marketing, but marketing is really kind of like the heart of the business, putting the whole package together. What's our pricing? How do we bring things to market, right? Advertising is, you're creating awareness and building your brand, but marketing is just more comprehensive, Cheryl. Okay, so we're going to think about this as an opportunity for us. If we can get people to prepay us, either through a gift card like Starbucks or a subscription service like Amazon Prime, right? Or, if you have a small intimate business and you have close clients, sometimes they will pay you in advance for things that are going to happen down the road. And so then all I want to focus on here is just like you, if you don't have any, you're lucky, but most of us have some type of long-term debt. And all that's down here, this is the owner's equity. We're not really worried about that today. I'm just being comprehensive, but you can see, Starbucks has a lot of earnings that they have left in the business and not paid out as cash, and they use that to grow the business. If I said Starbucks, I meant Amazon. Okay, so, and then their income statement looks like yours too, right? Yeah, there you go, taking the news from Shaylee. They pay her in advance. Net product sales. Amazon has more than one line of business, right? They have the line of business that, we're ordering stuff online, but they also have services like their servers and other things that you can do with Amazon. But like you, they have their cost of sales, and then they have underneath them, their total sales, and then what it costs them. That's their total operating expenses, fulfillment, technology, marketing, general and administrative. Theirs are probably lumped together in larger categories than yours, right? But it's still the same thing. To run this business, we have to incur some expenses. And then what I want to think about today is our operating income. All right. When we think about profitability, I'm going to want to focus on operating income. And then down here, we have things like financing. So that's our interest expense. Okay, but we're gonna focus here. Did you lose my audio?
I think it's still fine. I can still hear you, Kathleen.
Okay, so maybe it's just Lauren. All right. Can you write in the chat that you still hear me? So they know. I think it's fine. It's definitely on. Okay. So if you look at these financial statements, and then we can look at the statement of cash flows. I'm not going to get too much into the details, but it's basically saying how much cash is coming in the business from their operating activities, and where are they using this cash? So for example, are they buying property, plant, and equipment? Are they selling property and equipment? Are they buying other companies? Are they, remember they have, excess cash that they put into marketable securities, so they may be buying and selling those, okay? So we can see, these are investing activities. I would expect the cash flows to be negative. I would also expect at Amazon, which is a big company, to have positive cash from operations, okay? That makes sense. And then what's going on with their financing? And you can see they're paying off debt, they're borrowing new debt, they're paying off their leases, and those types of things. So if we just think about the whole package together, we said that companies do 4 main activities, right? Strategy, investing, financing, operations. You have to have some basic knowledge for even to get that far. And of course, you need skills in actually running the business. But we do these things. We see the effects of investing and financing in the balance sheet. We see the effects of operating activities in the income statement. And we see all 3 in the statement of cash flows. Okay, so it's really good to sit down and have a very good picture of where you're at. The problem with looking at financial statements is they can tell us what things are, but they're not telling a very good story, at least not a very succinct story. So what is important is to be able to do something called financial statement analysis. And I recommend, we have a template that we will send to you. I recommend looking at trying to put your numbers together and then trying to do a little bit of analysis. So the thing that I like to look at when it comes to running your business, okay, we'll talk about financing in a minute. We think about profitability and we think about risk. So when I'm thinking about your debt and all of that, I'm going to be thinking about risk because that's when I'm going to think about liquidity and solvency. But right now I'm focusing on profitability because I want to see, can you make improvements in your profit margin, or can you make improvements on how well you use your assets? So return on assets is basically your operating income. You can take your taxes out over your average assets. And then if we break those down into 2 components, right? If you multiplied these out, these would kind of cancel and you would be left with the same equation. But it's important to think about both sides of the business. So we think about expense ratios, right? So our profit margin at the beginning says for every $1 of sales, right? Let me write it. For every $1 of sales, how much do we keep? Right? So if I have $1 of sales and my operating income is 40 cents, then I have a 40% profit margin, which is a nice business to be in, I would imagine. But that depends on the business, whether that's good or bad. Grocery stores have very low margins, but they have high volumes, right? So that kind of works for them. It depends. So once you have your profit margin, where you just take your operating income. So for example, you could take this operating income of 265, 981, and do it over your sales, 285.22, and come up with some type of what you get to keep at the end of the day, which is what? Oh no, here's our operating income. Sorry, 15. I was gonna say that is pretty high. I can't erase, so I'm gonna scratch out 14,541. Now, looking at Amazon, you would probably have to break this up into the two businesses, because I imagine their services have huge profit margins and their product sales have very low profit margins. Because on the product sales, they're just buying and selling goods. On the services, they probably don't have a lot of costs associated with those. But anyway, you get the main point. You want some measure of, for every dollar of sales, how much do we keep? And anyone in retail or that has your own business, I think you understand margins. But knowing that gross margin like this is not as important or as helpful as thinking about all the different expense ratios, right? So you may say, okay, we had $1 in sales. We keep 40 cents, right? For every dollar of sales, we keep 40 cents. The question is, where does the other 60 go? Right? If you can figure out where the other 60 cents went, then you know where to try to improve, right? You can improve on any of these things in this row. Like maybe I could lower my rent, right? Maybe I could maybe I just cancel Comcast. Who really needs, Comcast anymore? We can just use Hulu, right? We can try to get on a payment plan. We can try something else. We can change advertising from, being in the Chicago Tribune to doing something on Instagram, right? Or trying to use public relations instead of paying for advertisements, right? So the idea here, this whole page is about where are we now? Let's just get the lay of the land. Let's figure out for every dollar of sales, how much am I keeping and where's that money going, right? Likewise, on the other side, when we think about what we call turnover ratios or asset turnover, what we're doing there is we're trying to figure out for every dollar of assets, I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. For every dollar of assets used in the business, how many dollars of sales do we get, right? Some companies are capital intensive, right? You need a lot of infrastructure to make sales, right? Like again, a grocery store, they have a lot of real estate costs, right? They may own that building. Something that is a consulting service may not have as many property, plant, or capital needs. Who knows, right? So this will all depend on your business model. Again, so this is saying how many dollars of sales for every dollar of assets. But let's break it down in the types of assets. So we might do something called accounts receivable turnover, where there we're just trying to say how many times a year do our bills get paid. So if I have, for example, let's say that I've got $1,000 in sales in a year, right? And let's say my average accounts receivable is $100. Then that would tell me my accounts receivable, I turn it 10 times a year, and on a yearly basis, it's saying it takes people about 36 and a half days to pay me. So Calvin asked me where we can find some benchmarks. There's a lot of sites, Calvin, online. If you just Google it, just ask for industry benchmarks, financial statement ratios. I think that's a good place to go. Okay. Just remember that it depends on the size of the business as well, because a bigger company is going to have a lot more purchasing power and may have an advantage over here, right, on their buyer power. So you could do the same thing. You could figure out how long it takes people to pay you. You could figure out how many days you hold your inventory. And fixed assets turnover is just sales over average PP&E. And that's basically saying how many dollars of sales do you get out of your property, plant, and equipment. Anything that we can improve on here, right? So any time that I can improve my ROA is good, right? As long as I'm not destroying aspects of the business. So for example, let me give you an example of what would not be good. You get your inventory costs down really low, but it turns out you have low quality products. right? You don't want to do that. There's always going to be kind of a trade-off between the price you pay for things and the quality of these things. So you have to find that kind of sweet spot, right? Like I ordered this hand sanitizer online. Took like a month to get here. I can't even use it. It smells terrible, right? So I went cheap and that's what I got, right? So these things can happen to you as well. Okay, let's think also about one big picture thing on return on assets. Return on assets is telling me, you know, for every dollar of assets, this is the percentage I earn. So let's say your return on assets was like 15%. And let's say that your financing costs for you to get capital were 12% or 10% or 6%. That means that you are earning more off your business than it cost you, to run the business. I don't know why my alarm is going off at this time of day. I'm gonna have to grab it. Hold on, you think about this for a second. I think the problem is I take a lot of naps now. And so I take a nap and I'm like, oh, I gotta get up at, I don't know why I have to get up at 2:38 p.m., but that's what it says. So what I was saying is, if you can compare what you're earning to what it costs you to get capital, whether that's, you know, which is depends on how risky your business is, then that's good for you. And so the idea of this tree is if you can improve things, any improvements that you can make down here are going to help you earn more off the assets already in place, right? So it's here because it's giving us kind of the landscape on where we can go for improvement. And if you look at Amazon, you know, I can see what their return on assets is, their margins, et cetera. In the appendix, which you will get this presentation, you can see how these things are calculated. But it's important if you're going to go ahead and do this, and I think you should try to do this for your own business. You're not going to have all the same things, but you'll have some. It's good to benchmark it. So you can either benchmark it over time. You can benchmark it across competitors, right? You could benchmark it towards kind of your management target or an industry average. So kind of like what Calvin was talking about earlier. Kind of see where you stand. And remember, there's going to be different effects depending on the size of your business. And you definitely must compare within your own industry. You can't really compare Microsoft to Whole Foods, right? Just not the same. So how can we improve these things? So that's kind of why we're here, right? So the main picture was, these are the things you do in your business. This is where you see them in the financial statements. Financial statements themselves are kind of flat. So if you can put them together into some type of ratio analysis that helps you tell a story, it's easier to understand. And then you have all of these things written out. So let's think about what you might do now. And I have to tell you that I went out to my former students and I put a note on Facebook and I was saying, you know, I get to do a talk with people in the neighborhood and students and other people about what we can do now, right? To kind of manage our cash. And I got, you know, pages and pages of stuff for them. So I'm very grateful to the whole community for contributing to this. But I want to point out, and they pointed out as well, it's not just for now, right? Now's a really good time. Things are bad to think about, well, maybe we need to put some things in place that will carry us forward. So it's a bad time now and we're really hurting. We're going to get out of it, hopefully. And if we do, let's get out of it a much stronger company and use what we learned, right? It's kind of like when you're learning, right? When you make mistakes, you learn more. Now you don't really have a choice. This was put upon you, but you could still be learning from it, okay? So Some of these things may seem basic to you, but I think just having them all together will be helpful. Number one, you need to cut out any unnecessary expenses and in the future. That would be one suggestion, right? So, for example, travel expenses. Obviously, you're going to cut them out now, but now that you're used to working virtually, could you in the future, in the near future, just say, you know, this year, next year, we're not going to do any travel. We're going to work on Zoom, right? We're going to use Blue Jeans. There are a lot of companies right now that are giving out free software to people to use during these times. So like for the next 6 months. So Forbes, I know, has a list. And if you go to the Forbes list, let's see. I don't know why did this freeze? Can you hear me still?
Yep, we can still hear you.
Okay, so I'm trying, oh, maybe I'm on eraser. I'm like, why am I not writing? And you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's frozen for a sec. Let me just reconnect. I just want to, yep, we're mirroring. Okay. I'm going to try something else. You see that? I know. Okay, great. All right, look at me. I was trying, sorry. That was like, you can't see. So you have to put up with my 50 plus years getting used to new technology. All right, so Forbes has a list. So we can cut out unnecessary expenses now in the future. Example would be travel. What about renegotiating your rent? I know a lot of my friends have gone back and asked for renegotiations in rent. Say I need a few months off, right? I really can't pay for this right now. Could you at least give me a discount? It's not like they have someone else that they're going to put in there right now, right? Because they don't have a lot of demand. Be polite, obviously, communicate, bring to them the facts. Say, listen, I ran my financials. These were my sales. These are now my sales. I literally cannot afford to pay you. Can you meet me halfway? And, you know, we have this implicit kind of contract where we will, I'll make it up to you in the future somehow, right? Talk to your suppliers. Talk to your employees. Think if you can get a discount on your product purchases, or maybe on the other side, let you pay them later. With your employees, you know, maybe they'll get together and they don't want to lose their jobs. You don't want to let them go. Figure out, you know, what's available from the government to help them. And maybe if you just like bring everyone's salary down a little bit or cut their hours down a little bit and, you know, give them a bonus plan for sometime in the future. There's lots of different ways to renegotiate. Reduce your advertising spend. So try to go towards more free stuff. Reconsider job design. Maybe you don't need as many employees as you had in the past, or maybe they can do more things. Can you cancel your commercial lease? Can you move to a virtual business, or at least part of it? Can you find a better way for shipping? Can you use some of these free or lower cost online services for administrative activities? So basically kind of like outsourcing. Or if you are in a strip mall or something with a bunch of other companies, can you use some shared resources in some way? Can you find some interns, right? I know the university, if you go to the Office of Civic Affairs, I think they have some students that like to volunteer to help local businesses, right? Tap into those at all the different universities. Interns may not have other internships this summer, and so they're willing to work virtually for other businesses. Maybe there's some government programs that will help subsidize the payment of your employees. So share resources, sublet any excess capacity, move to electronic payment processing. It might be cheaper and it's probably faster, right? You know, it might be a time where you have to cut your unprofitable customers and focus on the most profitable one, right? So remember, profit margin was like our expenses, in a way, it's our operating income over our sales. So you can either reduce your expenses or you can increase your revenues to improve this. So think about new lines of businesses if possible. Find ways to get these goods to your customers without meeting in person. You could try to hold a virtual event. So one of my friends, he said, if you had a conference that you normally would go to and make a lot of sales and now the conference is canceled, can you have a virtual conference or talk to the organization that was organizing it and see if you can get in on it? There may be other conferences that you couldn't have afforded because they were expensive or at a bad time of year. Now, if they go virtual, maybe you can participate. Find new platforms for selling goods and services. This could even be, even something like eBay, right? Maybe get rid of some of your old inventory. So this is helping you with the margin. What will help me with better use of my assets? Well, you need to manage your accounts receivable. Well, you could. How do you do it? Send reminders to customers to pay you. Offer discounts to customers to get them to pay you sooner. Sell vouchers or gift cards like Starbucks, right? Give someone a discount for paying in advance. I used to live in Singapore for a while for work, and there were a lot of things that I bought as services, like even things like haircuts or manicures. You always had to buy the package. You always bought the package. They always got paid in advance, and then you used it over time, and then you re-upped. So maybe you can do some things like that. In the extreme, which is not that extreme, maybe you can look into some of these companies that buy accounts receivable. They're not going to give you 100% on the dollar, but they might give you 80 cents on the dollar, 90 cents on the dollar. I know there's a lot of other, kind of big funds out there that like to buy and sell people's working capital. That's a little bit harder to get into, but you could find a resource maybe that could get you there. Think about changes to your business model. So this falls under kind of that strategy box that we talked about. Manage your inventory, right? Now is a really good time to sit down and say, do I really need to hold 40 days of inventory? Now, if you're a furniture company, you're probably going to have to hold 4 or 5 months. But I think people are willing to wait a little bit longer now. So maybe you don't hold as much inventory. Maybe you clean out some of the inventory that you have. Maybe you kind of look at your supply chain from beginning to end. So from when you purchase it to when it goes to the customer, that's you, that's your customer, right? Like, can we shorten this in some way? And can we make it less inventory for shorter periods of time? Because every dollar that you have tied up in inventory is costing you money, right? Manage your fixed assets. Are there some things you don't need anymore or that you can donate and get a deduction for on your tax return, right? Can you make better use of the ones you have? Have someone else come in and share your space, perhaps. For some of you, this makes no sense, and you'll be like, that's a dumb idea for me, but it might be a good idea for someone else. So we talked about ROA, and we said when you think about ROA, we think about profit margin, and we think about our total asset turnover. So if you want to improve your margins or your total asset turnover to get more money out of your assets, try those things. But a lot of concern we have is liquidity, right? So this is what I call risk. So liquidity risk is short-term obligations. Can I make payroll? Can I pay my bills? Are my lights going to be shut off, right? So this is what I would call liquidity. You want to think about how many days do I have to pay my suppliers? They can be suppliers of goods, could be your employees, could be utilities, could be anything. Do we have enough current assets to meet our current obligations? So remember, current assets are future benefits and those that we expect to get within a year. Current liabilities, we need to pay within a year, right? So if you have a lot fewer current assets than current liabilities, you're going to be in trouble, right? So do you have enough cash reserves? Do you have inventory that you can sell? Do you have accounts receivable out there that you can collect, right? So this is the kind of questions you would ask yourself about liquidity. Solvency risk is about, can you stay in business? So solvency risk is a little more scarier, and a little more extreme, right? Because this is about, can we stay out of bankruptcy? Now, you got to face facts, right? Some of us are not going to have this business in a year, right? But most of you will, right? But it might be at some point you're like, you know what, this is just not the right business anymore. So ask yourself the hard questions, right? And try to think about, let me build a model, let me forecast out, is there any way for me to get out of this hole? If there's not, cut bait, right? And go. But if there is, and there's lots of opportunities for you to do it, and I'm not saying don't do that until you've tried everything, right? But you should also, in the interest of showing you everything, also think about what's the worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario for this company is that it doesn't go, and maybe I'll start it again later, but maybe then you want to think about, how much are these assets worth if I had to liquidate them? We're not going to focus on this so much because our goal today is to help you manage your cash and get out of the hole. All I'm saying is that when you're doing this analysis, try to do the whole analysis, right? Don't throw good money after bad. If it's really not going to work, there's some businesses that just won't work anymore, at least not in the short run. So how can you improve this though, right? Number one, we've said it before, you need to renegotiate. Don't be afraid to renegotiate. Pick up the phone and call. Have your ducks in a row. Explain where you're at, when your cash is going to come back, what your plans are for the future, how you're changing your strategy, how you're going to now manage your inventory and your accounts receivable, and this is what your cash is going to look like. Go out there if you can, if you don't already have one, obtain a line of credit, right? Do this now while your credit ratings are high, right? Explore these other loans. For those of you that didn't go, Polsky and Rostandi, they did in Office of Civic Affairs, they did a presentation earlier on these possibilities. Maybe get a business credit card. Talk to the debt relief companies. You never know. They might have something good for you. So these are the companies that they do these consolidations for you, and we mostly think about them like when we get into credit card debt and we want to consolidate things. But some are out there for companies as well. Just be careful, right, on making sure you find a reputable one. Watch out what those fees are going to be, etc. Refinance anything that you can refinance. Sell assets that you don't need to run the business. Again, you could consider some non-traditional loan platforms like Prosper or something else, or crowdfunding, but be careful, do your due diligence, okay, on such things. But they're out there, and Prosper loans, for example, are much cheaper than those payday loans that you're going to get if you go down to, One Main and ask them for a 30% loan. That's pretty high, right? But on a Prosper or something like that, as long as your credit rating is pretty good, you could get a good rate, 12, 13%, which is still cheaper than credit card debt in many cases. And then the other thing that I think you should pay a good attention to is reducing your working capital needs and decreasing what we call your cash cycle. So let's think about what this cash cycle is. Tom, I'm going to answer your question a little bit. So the cash cycle really is telling us how many days of cash do we need to run our business? Like how much cash is tied up in the business at any point in time, right? So a simple example would be, let's say that it takes 30 days for people to pay you. And let's say you hold 45 days of inventory, but you're allowed to pay your supplier in 35 days. So for this company, we would say your cash cycle is how many days it takes people to pay you, plus how many days of inventory you hold, minus how many days it takes you get, I should say, to pay off your suppliers. Yeah. And then if you did that, you would say 40 days. So think about what's going on here. So basically, you might have your sale here. You might have your cash collection here. You might have your buy inventory here, and you might have pay inventory here, right? So you buy your inventory, hold it for 45 days. Then it takes people another 30 days to pay you, but at least, you had 35 days here. Well, what does it mean, days outstanding? This is very back of the envelope, but if you had daily sales of $500, basically what that means is you have 40 days of sales tied up in the business. And so that's 20 grand. So how can you improve that? Well, you can get people to pay you more quickly. You can hold your inventory for fewer days. You can pay your suppliers in more days, right? So Lev Slavin that I work with, he made a nice spreadsheet for you. And so this is what it looks like. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Oops, there we go. It's kind of not letting me do that, but let me show you what's going on. I'm going to put it on my iPad. So today I'm trying out new technology. So let me go back there. All right. It's going to be hard for you to see that, I see. It always works when you test it, right? Let's try it again. I'm not going to panic. There we go. Now it works. So what does this little spreadsheet do for you? So basically, if you were in scenario A and it took 30 days for people to pay you, and you received cash, I added this thing where maybe you could get cash paid in advance. If you held your inventory for 20 days, minus your days to pay, this kind of gives us our cash conversion cycle. Go away. Okay. I put your sales at 1,000 a day. I don't know what your sales are. They could be anything. And you can see it says, this is my cash conversion cycle and how much cash is going to be tied up in my business. But if I could reduce my days outstanding to 15 days, if people would pay us more quickly and we could pay in 45 days, even if we kept our inventory holding it for 20 days, all of a sudden our cash conversion cycle is negative and we don't have to hold as much cash, right? So our cash needs to run the business are smaller. So this is showing you kind of practically, and we'll send this to you so you can explore it, kind of figure out what's going on with your business. Okay, so it's really fun, I think, to play with these things. So I'm going to give you that. We are going to give you that. And thanks to Lev for creating it. Okay, so one way to help manage your cash is to kind of make sure you don't need as much cash in the business. If we brought this down, let's bring this down. I know I'm probably going over, but it's recorded if you have to leave. Let's say that people paid you in 15 days, you held inventory for 20, and your supplier let you pay them in 60. Your cash cycle is going to be negative, right? Which means you're getting cash in advance before you have to run your business, so your suppliers and your customers are helping finance the working capital of your business. So in general, what is my advice? Number one, mine and everyone that contributed, review your financials. Get a hold of where you're at. Think about your strategy. Think about your investing activities. Think about how you're paying for things and how you're running your business, okay? So kind of like sit back and take a big picture as if you're starting your business plan all over again, right? You've probably been just like rush, from one thing to the next. You know how it is when you own your own business. now you have time to think. You also have time to worry, but if you could like spend some of that time positively thinking, that would be great. You can't control what's going on. Build a forecast, maybe for the next month, the next quarter, the next 6 months, for a year, right? Perform what we call scenario analysis. So like best case, worst case, other case, and sensitivity analysis. What are your results most sensitive to? Was it your forecast of revenue, cost of goods sold, anything like that? Make sure that you focus also on, can you, if you want to borrow money, can you pay that back? Communicate. You know, the sooner you get in front of it, the better. Before everyone else tries to get in front of it, you get in front of it first. Talk to your bank. I know that when I log into my bank, every day I see something, if you need help, call us, right? We'll freeze your mortgage payments. We'll freeze your credit card payments. We will not make you pay interest. We won't accrue interest, all of these things. So take advantage, get out there in front of these things, get on the phone. You're going to be on hold a long time, maybe, but you know what? Watch Netflix while you do it. Watch TV. Don't watch CNN, MSNBC, or Fox, though, because you'll go crazy. I've already been there. Renegotiate what you can. Renegotiate early. Be super prepared. Really just have a really good handle on your business. Consider merging, right? If it gets to the point, maybe you need to merge with another company. You need to share resources, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility to do such things. Maybe sell part of your company, right? Find a silent partner or a not silent partner, right? Maybe a strategic partner that will give you a cash inflow. I'm sure there's lots of people out there right now that are thinking, hey, it's a good opportunity, right? Talk to your banks, collaborate with your peers, get involved in any peer organizations. If you're old enough, maybe like the AARP, right? They seem to have a lot of things going on. If you're not old enough, ask your parents to go in there and look and see what they have. Take the opportunity to rethink your strategy and your organizational structure. Be careful about your extreme measures, right? That's what I'm saying. If you're getting to this point where you're tempted to take on a 30% loan or more, you got to think carefully about what makes sense, right? What is the likelihood of success? We don't want these things to happen, right? The point of this presentation is to help you think about ways to do this. But you also have to keep in mind that there is a small percentage chance that it might be just time to close up shop temporarily or permanently, right? And hopefully that will not happen. And there's lots of people out here willing to help you, okay? So take advantage of that. Okay, so I went too long, but I still didn't go all I still have time for questions, of course. So I think it takes a few minutes. I will answer the questions that are there. By the way, Bruce put some nice suggestions in there about who to talk to, about working capital and lines of credit. How do you train non-finance people to see the world you do? Well, Tom, as long as you know it, you can explain it to them, right? I would say just speak very clearly to them and just make sure not to use as much jargon. I probably used a little too much jargon than you would want to use with your employees, but just practice telling them in plain English, right? You can always email. I have an email address. It's Kathleen.Fitzgerald at, I never leave enough room. I don't know why, because I know how long my name is. It's 18 letters. If you want to email me, anyone. Let's see. And then Lauren, I think before said yes, you can work with the spreadsheet for it to make sense, but you can always email me. And then you had the same question as Calvin. Yeah, I would say look on Google for industry averages. Calvin, you have a lot of resources because you're an alum. You can go to the research pages at Booth. Just email me. I'll show you. Calvin, I've known you a long time. Does anyone else have questions? I think it takes a few minutes, right? But chat me something so I'm not all, well, I'm here with my cat.
Hey, Kathleen, I think there was also a question related to consulting businesses, particularly those, how they might be thinking about driving some of the cash changes that you were talking about, negotiate better terms with clients that are usually larger, sales cycles are long.
Oh yeah,
Tips.
that was Calvin. Thank you, Tom. So let's think about what you could do. You have your own consulting company now, huh? Congratulations. I mean, yeah, you don't have a lot of suppliers, right? So it's hard for you not to pay them. I think what I would do is, I mean, the best thing to do is go to your customers in your case, right? Any suppliers that you do have, I would tap into. You don't have any inventory. Your employees, you want to pay them, so that's the issue. I mean, all I could do is maybe change your incentive plan for your employees to maybe pay them a base pay enough for them to make their bills, and then a bonus for, next year on hitting certain targets, right? For some of us, our day-to-day expenses have gone down a little bit because there's not, we're not going to Starbucks for coffee or doing other things. You can make coffee at home. We're learning how to make do, right? So, and shoot me an email, Calvin. We can talk about it. But in general, for those of you that are service companies that don't have many assets, the best thing that you're probably going to be able to do is go to your customers and try to maybe also think about other ways of delivering them. So my friend, she has a place in Utah where people come and they work out. It's like a boot camp, and they had to close, right? And they're always like just this far of being out of business. So one of the things that they're doing now is they're doing like a quarantine diet where they give us a diet and they have exercises that people are doing. Even if they don't make any money off that, they're definitely building awareness and building loyalty with their teams, right? Yeah. So there's like creative things that you can do. People are becoming very creative. Just put into Google, creative things people are doing to make money in the crisis. Who knows? Maybe something will resonate. I use the Google all the time, right?
Well, Kathleen,
Anything else? Yeah.
I think we've gotten to all the questions. So
Okay.
so much. This has been a really great set of resources. And if you did miss it, Kathleen and Lev will be sharing out some additional resources. So be sure to register for this if you did not, and that will be sent out over email later today or early next week. For those of you able to join and see some of the other seminars live, those are available on the Polsky Center YouTube channel, and as well that will be sent out to all of the attendees. So,
okay, thanks so much. Thanks to EJ and Katie and everyone else at Polsky and Rustandi. I just want to point out in the Excel template, we also have the data that we use for Amazon and put in a template for you. This is something else that Lev created to kind of help you work through things. So I hope it's helpful, and we're here for you. So make it happen, right? Let us know if you need anything, and we really do appreciate you coming.
thank you so much, Kathleen, and please do be watching. We've got some more exciting programs that we'll be announcing next week to work with small business owners beginning in the month of May. So May is actually National Small Business Week. So we know this is a very difficult time, but we continue to see great opportunity, and we'll be working to help bring our business owners all over the world together. So thanks so much for joining us. Kathleen, thank you, and everyone have a great rest of the weekend.
Okay, super. And Maggie asked a question. Maggie, just PM me because one of our alums had some ideas on payment methods. So I'll hook you up. All right, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.